Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to be sharing the basic proportions of the human head. Now keep in mind that everyone has their own way, their own technique, their own approach to drawing the human head and to teach the proportions. This is just the way I learned and the way that I find easiest to teach. With that being said, let's get started. And as you can see, we're starting with this upside down X shape, and that's really how I think it's best to think about it. Now we're going to be dividing the head in half vertically and horizontally. After that, we're dividing the bottom half into thirds. So that's what I'm doing right now. Next, we're going to be creating eye lengths. And eye lengths are very important because they're also the width of the nose. So when creating eye lengths, you need 5 eye lengths across the face. So you'll be able to see as I'm doing it. It's kind of hard to explain, but as I'm doing it, you'll be able to see what I mean when it's 5 eye lengths. That's the width of the human head. And now here, I'm dropping the center eye length down to create the width of the nose. Now, when we broke the bottom half into thirds, the top line of that bottom half, we're going to go right underneath it, as I'm doing right now, and drawing in the nose. So this is where the nose goes. And you see I'm just drawing the basic shape of a nose, very generic, very basic, just to have it in there for now. And now I'm going to be working on the eye. So we already have those eye lengths in, and we're just going to be creating that basic shape of that top lid on each of the eyes, as well as create a basic pupil on the eye. And now this is very important, dropping the pupils down. As you're seeing, I'm going to be dropping sort of a vertical down from the eye, the pupil, and that's going to be the sides of the mouth. And we're putting in a basic mouth shape in here. I like to give a good amount of distance between the eye and the eyebrows, although this is a very generic person or human figure that we're creating. Everyone's features are distinctively different, but this is just a basic guide. And from the eye to the nose, we're creating these lines that go to the sides of the head, and these lines will indicate where the ears go. So we'll just be putting that basic shape of the ear. And lastly, we're going to be putting in the neck, which is placed right underneath the jaw. It doesn't come from the ear, and it doesn't come from anywhere near the chin. It's right underneath the jaw where you see that kind of taper in from the side of the ear to the jaw. Now, as you can see, I'm creating where the hairline is on this figure, and just keep in mind that hair is an accessory. It's not something that's definite. It's not something that's defined. It can change at any point. It can change within one individual how they do their hair. So just think of hair as an accessory. That always helps me. Okay, now I want to get into something that's a little more advanced, so to speak, but I feel like it's extremely important when it comes to representing the figure, and that's just the basic values that we're gonna have on this figure. I want to get into that just a little bit. So we'll just be creating some shadows and some lights. And I like to start with the shadow underneath the eyebrow into the eye, because it's one of the most obvious shadows that we have. And that goes smoothly into the bottom lid and the shadow that's created underneath the eye. Next, we're gonna go right underneath the nose, and that's a pretty massive and I would say obvious shadow as well. The upper lip is going to be in the shadow, as the bottom lip is going to be in the light, and the area underneath the bottom lip is most likely going to be in the shadow. and you'll have somewhat of a shadow on the sides, you know, where the cheekbones are, and also on the sides of the nose, as well as in the forehead area, to the sides and the temple. And the biggest shadow usually is the one right underneath the neck, so we'll just create that shape, which kind of, you know, goes along the shape of the chin and the jaw. And I always like to start with the shadows, because now the light just becomes pretty easy, just filling in the other areas where the shadow is not. So we'll just work on that just a little bit. And the thing to consider, the thing to keep in mind is that this all depends on where the light source is, and just for these purposes, we're assuming that the light source is above the figure, probably centrally above the figure. It's not to the side, so it's not creating a dramatic kind of chiaroscuro lighting. It's just really basic, just so we can see the features right above the figure's head. And I'm even going to include a few highlights in this portrait, and those will go on the forehead, on the nose, some in the eyes. You'll see where those go as I'm just working through this, taking some liberties with this painting. Next, I want to just show a little bit more in detail about how to draw the specific features of the portrait, and I'm just going to select a few of the main features that, you know, we really stress about or that we really want to get right. So I'm just going to sketch these out in this time-lapse form. First, I'm starting with the eye, and I'm just including the basic proportions. And since I've done this quite a bit right now, I'm not really going off of any how-to guide. I'm just taking a lot of liberties. And there you pretty much have the basic eye drawing, the basic eye shape. Now I'm gonna move on to the lips and the nose and just create the basic shape of the lips first and really indicate where the shadows go. And, you know, now we're moving on to the nose. And, you know, I'm just doing a bit of sketching as I would if I was to warm up. Next, really quickly, I just want to go into a different way of creating this this human head, and that's just by starting with the shadows. You're not even starting with the drawing. You're not starting with proportions. After you kind of learn the proportions, you just know how big the mass of the eyeshadow is, and you can put that in, how big the nose shadow is, how big the neck shadow is, and all these different features just become light and dark, shadow and light, and then it just becomes a lot easier to draw in that way, where you're starting with these value shapes and you're carving into them to find the features within them. So here we have a really quick drawing or painting or illustration of the human head, basically what we did before, but here just starting out with shadow shapes. And lastly, I just want to discuss a bit about how important the proportions are. Here I'm creating a person whose eyes are really high up. Next I'm going to be creating a person whose eyes are pretty low, and then someone whose eyes are in the center, as we learned today. And I think it's really important to notice a few things about these three different ways of depicting a person, even though what we basically have is just that oval shape and a few dots that indicate a few features. The one with eyes that are closer to the top of the head automatically looks a lot older, and that is due to gravity and the nature of human development, whereas the one with eyes that are lower kind of looks like a child, looks like a baby, and the one whose eyes are in the center looks like a person that could be developed but hasn't reached their mature years just yet. So it's important to notice that just these three subtle things can really have an impact on the figures that you're painting. And that's pretty much it for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, please write them down below and I'll be happy to answer any of those questions. Please like this video. If you think someone would benefit, please share it with them. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you next time.